Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those joining us here today. We're very glad to have you for our webinar today on the countdown to CBAM 2026, how businesses and industries are getting ready. My name is Humberto Juarez Rocha, and I'm an editor here at Opus, where I cover carbon compliance markets and biodiversity markets as well. I'm very excited to delve into this topic of CBAM, its uncertainties, its evolution, and especially how to navigate these risks and their implications for supply chains. Just to start off, just to show you what we have on today's agenda, we want to focus on the following themes with our esteemed panelists, Robert Heidman from Arcus Group, Gabriel Rosenberg, co-founder of CBAM, and Stanislav Zinchenko, CEO of GMK Center. The topics that we want to focus on today and that we think are of utmost importance as we head into CBAM's definitive period next year are the CBAM's transitional phase, which dates back to October 2023, the recent changes to the CBAM and possible exemptions, managing CBAM risks, costs, and uncertainties, and the impacts on the supply chains and trade flows due to this policy. We'll save some time at the end today for some Q&A, and very excited to delve into this. Just to give you an idea of who Opus is, we are part of the Dow Jones Group of global information services dedicated to strengthening what you know and how to do business, including a number of other companies like Chemical Market Analytics, McCloskey, MarketWatch, The Wall Street Journal, Factiva, and others. Among some of our many offerings, we look at carbon markets, biofuel reports, Camiro, the Global Carbon Offsets Report, Biodiversity Market Report, as well as ammonia services from Chemical Market Analytics. Before introducing our esteemed panelists, I do want to lay out a bit of the background of this webinar today. The CBAM, or the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, is an important tool that the European Union is using as part of its Fit for 55 package, which is the goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030, based on 1990 levels. The CBAM is a tariff on the embedded carbon emissions of goods that come into the European Union, essentially placing the carbon price of the EU's emissions trading system on the carbon emissions of these imports to level the playing field for European industry. European industry has been paying a carbon price since 2005, and currently the price is at around 76 euros per metric ton. The CBAM has been in its transitional phase since October 2023 and will be moving into its definitive phase starting January 1st, 2026, with direct and indirect implications for entities exporting to the EU across a number of sectors. With me today are three esteemed panelists who I'm very excited to introduce, and I'll let them introduce themselves before we delve into what will surely be a very interesting discussion. Robert, the floor is yours.
The Arcus Group is one of Europe's leading distributors of predominantly stainless steel pipes, fittings, and flanges. And over the many years that we are active, we have built strong and long-lasting relationships with both customers and suppliers by consistently going the extra mile in customer service and constantly proving to be a reliable partner in business. Our motto, as you can see here, is that we join forces to exceed customers' expectations. So where are our forces located? Spread over the Netherlands, France, Germany, and Belgium, the Arcus Group counts 13 sales offices, of which 8 offices also stock material. And here on the right-hand side, you can see the head offices in the Netherlands, France, and Germany. What do we offer? As I said before, pipes, fittings, and flanges, both of European and non-European origin, in normal steel grades 304L, 316L, but also in the typical German steel grades 321 and 360 Ti. But we also stock duplex, super duplex according to Norfolk, and on the project basis, we can also offer nickel alloys. Within the Arcus Group, we also have a concept called Industrial Supplies, which is a 24/7 one-stop shop that caters a concentrated industrial area, like, for instance, the Rotterdam Harbor. So in these locations, we also stock carbon steel, gaskets, valves, etc., to give the complete package. With our German branch, we can add value for our customers by offering services such as machining and pickling. And all of our customers have access to our web portal where they can place, track and trace orders retrieve certificates, etc. A quick look at our main customer groups. They all have in common that they need pipe fittings and flanges for more critical use. And of course, each and every customer group has its own specific needs, to which we try to cater as much as possible. Like, for instance, by stocking an extensive stock of marine-approved material for the shipping industry, by being flexible for installers in the sense that we can deliver one package of 3 kilo within a day, but also very large and complex projects. And in France, we serve the nuclear industry with a specially dedicated department. Also, we act as a master distributor for other stockists and traders. Finally, some figures and facts to conclude. With 230 people, we serve 2,500 customers in 45 countries, mainly in Europe. Our turnover is around 200 million, and we stock about 7,500 tons in stock. And to illustrate the relevance of CBAM, our volume last year that we generated was 20,000 tons, of which, let's say, half was imported from outside the EU. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Hi, shall I go next? So, hi there, I'm Gabriel Rosenberg. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CBAM. The company in 2023, just when the CBAM legislation was being passed in the EU. And as the name suggests, we've been focused from the beginning on CBAM in the EU and in the future in the UK and other regions. So since we've begun, we've helped companies around the world navigate the emerging requirements of CBAM by providing a digital solution. So we manage the supplier side, we manage the declarant side, we bring the data together, help people with their compliance needs, and increasingly and more importantly, with what I call CBAM management. So CBAM is fundamentally a change that demands the attention of procurement managers and finance teams within the organization, as we've just heard. It changes the nature of trade when it comes to commodities, primarily steel. And so we look to provide those kind of sophisticated analytics for CFOs and CPOs to show the CBAM costs directly at the point of purchase. That's our main focus. And to make use of it throughout the enterprise. In terms of supply chain data gathering, we get results fast. Our customers typically reach over 90% supplier data coverage within 60 days of an engagement. It's very much a combination between the software, the in-house expertise that we've built up here as thought leaders in the CBAM space, and also the service that we provide to help all companies organize themselves around the new demands of CBAM, which frequently require companies to coordinate between different teams in fresh ways, and that's also part of our service package. More recently, we've seen a lot of interest from freight forwarders, logistics companies, intermediaries who are caught up in CBAM, and we are providing solutions for them as well. So in short, our mission is to make CBAM work and work better. And we're providing tools that integrate CBAM into business decisions through consistent product innovation and in-house expertise.
Thank you. And Stanislav, ready for you.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Stanislav Zinchenko. I'm CEO of GMK Centers. GMK Center is a consultant company focused on Europe. 5 years ago was presented our first study about CBAM and how it will impact on European steel market and also in Ukrainian trade with Europe. So our company is, as I told, focused on consulting market players with European steel market, and really I understood. So let's discuss it today.
Thank you so much, Stanislav, for the introduction. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Gabriel. And yeah, let's get started. So we want to focus on the first theme of today, which is the CBAM's transitional phase and its early challenges. Robert, my question is to you. You just mentioned the role that Arcus Group plays in this environment. You're a steel, you're someone who receives steel. You engage with CBAM on a direct basis. We've known CBAM was going to be a far-reaching policy since before 2023, when it went into its transitional phase. What has been the most significant challenge since CBAM went live in October 2023 until now for you and for Arcus Group?
Yeah, I think there were actually two challenges, let's say. First challenge was collecting the data from our suppliers. Most of our key suppliers are renowned companies who were already used to do CSRD reporting. And those companies did not have any problems with producing emission data about their own activities. The real challenge was that further down the chain, the base material suppliers had difficulties to give reliable data to our suppliers. And as a result, in the beginning, the emission data that we received from our suppliers were based largely on default values. And I think it took us till first half of this year, for the key suppliers at least, to have our suppliers report emission data based on the maximum allowed 20% of default values. Smaller suppliers had more problems with producing data, as they, in most cases, were entirely, the CBAM problematics were entirely new for them. And they also didn't have dedicated departments to produce the figures. And they had actually no clue where to start with the template of the EC that we sent them. Here, I must say that CBAM was a great help to us, because they took work out of our hands by guiding and explaining to our suppliers the steps that were required to create and share CBAM combined emission data. Another big challenge that was internally then was more to set up the quarterly CBAM reporting. Also because we have 4 different entities that made it a lot of work, let's say. So in the beginning, I think our financial department took about 4 to 5 days each quarter to get the files with all the necessary data ready for upload into the platform of the European Commission. That period went down drastically when we hooked up with CBAM, and what we do now is actually that we just upload data about our suppliers, CN codes and weights into the CBAM platform, and then we have to do some checks on possible mistakes there are in there. But when that is done, then CBAM can return to us an XML file that we can easily upload into the EC platform. So in the beginning, a lot of time, let's say, to get the proper data from our suppliers and to have the reporting set up correctly. So I would say those were the biggest challenges.
Very, very interesting, especially you mentioned default values, which is something that I really want to delve into as the conversation goes on. We've seen that, if you're unable to procure all that information, default values are what you're supposed to use, but these are by design punitive. So, and I want to get into that in a second. Thank you, Robert. Gabriel, I'm very interested. I mean, you're engaged with CBAM, you're a software startup. As CBAM has progressed through this transitional phase, how have you and CBAM navigated all the uncertainties? And especially, we saw there were delays in reporting in 2024. How have you navigated through these uncertainties?
Well, Humberto, I mean, there have been a lot of uncertainties and a certain number of delays on key things, and businesses across Europe are immensely frustrated by that. And it's not easy for us. We see our job as to make CBAM work. We think that's worthwhile, by the way. I mean, we're not here to impose the EU's rules, and there are times when the EU gets it wrong. But we fundamentally believe in the idea of pricing carbon, and that includes pricing carbon at the border. So we want to make the system work. And what we consistently see is that the system was developed in a reasonably academically pure way. So it came out of a kind of, you might say, elite discussion in Brussels about how a CBAM should, in theory, work. No one has ever done it before. And it was missing business knowledge, by which I don't mean that there was no business input. I mean that the specific ways in which companies actually operate in the different sectors that would be most affected by CBAM, I don't think that was top of mind when this legislation was being written. And we find it's still quite difficult to get that business, how things actually work to transfer into the kind of biblical rules that we've been handed down here, right? So we have to find a way to apply these rules to the real world and ask how they work and ask what some line in the text is going to mean for this particular business in practice. Because, a lot of the time the system is quite silent about the answers to those things. There hasn't yet built up a kind of body of case law so that can guide us. So we're just going back to the original legislation. And where there's uncertainty, we're saying, well, what do we know? And how much can we bring that to life for our customers? And how much can we help them, understand the range of uncertainty that could be going on? And it's the delays are challenging. They are much more challenging for our customers than for us, right? It's certainly difficult for us to show the full value of what we can bring when we are missing key things like benchmark factors and default values of the definitive period, no doubt. But it's outrageously difficult if you are a steel company right now looking to go into your key negotiating round with your Asian suppliers, let's say, to set prices for the upcoming year. And right now, we don't have the benchmark values that allow you to know what the plausible CBAM price is going to be. And that could be the difference between making money on a transaction and losing it. And so businesses are quite confused. They're hanging back from the market. And we're in the slightly difficult position of just reminding people on the European Commission's behalf that this system, for all its faults, is absolutely starting on January the 1st. And in terms of the buying that you're now doing, which will come into the EU a few months later, it's already begun. So that's where we are, somewhere in the middle.
Very, very interesting. And especially when you mentioned benchmark values, we've been waiting on those this year. We still haven't seen them. This will play a crucial part when it comes to not only CBAM, but EU ETS prices. So I'd be very interested in talking about that as we progress on today's webinar. Thank you, Gabriel. Stanislav, you've covered how trade will be affected by the CBAM. And of the countries you've looked into, which ones are particularly exposed and how?
Yeah, look, sorry, Hubert, I want to go a little bit deeper on topic that was mentioned before. First of all, we will, next 5 years, we will never see certain situation. 5 years of high level of uncertainty because of CBAM. Not like axiom, but it will be. We understand why, because CBAM is really, really something new, and they will change it every 3-6 months. So that's why traders, producers, market players, they are waiting for some publication, announcement from European Commission, and then everything will be clear. No. So it will be 5 years of, not because of bureaucracy in Brussels, because it's alive. This mechanism is alive. So, and then going back to steel, for example, it's not about climate change. It's about 30 million tons of steel import to European Union. Yeah. So the impact differs depending on segment. In long segment, EAF route is dominating in Europe. So 60% of import supply are from BF BOFs. So European EAF producers will be able to substitute domestic and imported BF BOF longs because of CBAM nearest 1-2 years. Okay. In flat segments, both EU and import producers, at least 90% of steel produced via BF BOF route, flat producers will be able to transfer carbon cost on customer, and everybody understand it. So customer will pay more because of CBAM. So according to our estimation and different expert estimation, price could rise at least 40 euro per ton next year because of a flat segment, because of CBAM. In short term, but we need to understand, it will be different impact in short, middle, and long term because of CBAM on steel market. In short term, CBAM will result in increase in steel prices, and it's beneficial for European producers that will increase their margin. I also expect changes in import sources, of course. For example, Turkey and MENA countries could increase their market share because they are already EAF producers. And in long terms, CBAM will lead to losses for European steel producers, especially exporters. CBAM will accelerate decrease in free allowances in ETS. If now only 5% of needed allowances is bought on market, in 2030 this figure can rise till 50%. So according to our estimation, carbon costs of European steel producers could increase by almost 100 euro by 2030. So it's very, of course, we can talk about hours, about reports, about benchmarks and so on. But first of all, we're talking about money, we're talking about market share, we're talking about margin of local steel producers and importers. So from my point of view, the most important thing, it's how to fully replenish your supply chain, how to understand your market position, how to hedge your costs, yeah, and to understand and to rebuild your trading, processing, or supply chain processes.
Thank you, Stanislav. And very interesting because it is a cost, something that we have to take into account already now, but ahead of 2030 when the carbon price is also expected to go up. And the importance of the carbon price here, it is because the carbon price in Europe will be tied to CBAM certificates. Thank you, Stanislav. Robert, I want to go back to you. A big topic of discussion throughout this year has been the changes to the CBAM that have been taking place this year, but also that the European Parliament has recently approved and are now waiting on final approval from the European Council. There's been a couple of changes from the de minimis value to which anyone would have been subjected to the CBAM. That has now changed. It's gone from, I believe, 100 euros per metric ton of shipment value. And let's remember the CBAM covers a couple of different sectors: steel, iron, cement, fertilizer, hydrogen, and electricity. That is now equivalent to 50 metric tons. If you bring in 50 metric tons of these CBAM covered goods, you're now subject, and this was done by the European Commission to exempt SMEs from this. Another change has been the delay of CBAM certificates. The very item that you have to buy in order to comply with CBAM, those were originally scheduled for sale in 2026. That has now been moved to February of 2027. So, Robert, I'm wondering, have these changes done anything? Do you have these changes meant any significant change to you or the way that you operate your business? And what changes are you most concerned about?
No, I have to say those were not of influence. Those changes. What we are actually waiting for are the missing data. Let's say, to be able to make a plan. Let's say, and to estimate what the effects will be on the market. So if you talk about the changes that have been made during 2025, then what we mostly see are merely extensions in timelines, as you also stated, and simplifications. So that is not a cause for worry, let's say. So you already mentioned that the certificate purchasing will be now starting in 2027, February. So that will allow us to give us more time to plan, let's say. Also, the annual surrender date for imports in 2026 has moved from May to August, which also gives us more time. But also things like the quarterly holding requirement that dropped from 80 to 50%. That is, let's say, that will less squeeze, let's say, our cash flow. So that's also not a bad thing. And furthermore, we have some more clarity on the pricing of our imports in 2026 because it has been disclosed that the quarterly averages of the ETS over 2026 will be used for the CBAM certificate pricing. So all in all, I would say we are not worried about those things. But as Gabriel already mentioned, we are worried about the missing information. Yeah.
Thank you. And Gabriel, up to you. We're talking about these changes. I'm wondering, how have these affected your different types of customers? And are these changes significant enough to warrant a rethink of how you help companies comply with these types of obligations? And especially when it comes, as Robert mentioned, the CBAM costs, the CBAM certificates, which we were scheduled to be able to purchase next year, that has now been moved. How has that changed the way that you help companies comply?
So I think there are two kind of changes that stand out in what's called the omnibus legislation that's just been passed through the European Parliament. And they're quite different in this sort of effect. One is kind of the big one, which is widely understood, which is that companies that import less than 50 tons a year don't have to report CBAM. That for us is a relief because we would have a lot of conversations with companies and they would say, we go through the whole process of explaining what was required. And they'd say, well, maybe we need your help. And they'd say, well, there might be a high value add manufacturer that imports a small amount of some premium kind of aluminium every year, maybe 100 kilograms a year of product. And they'd say, and I have to get this information from all these suppliers and so on and so on and so on. And then that seems like, and you'd realize you would never want to help them because they would be better off actually just being fined. Okay, it would have been totally not worth their time or our time to do a proper job of putting together the information. So it was just very sensible concession to business reality to exclude companies that were importing less than 50 tons from CBAM. And rather nicely, it was also a concession that doesn't really substantially impact the climate goals of the legislation. So it's not the same as if they'd said, well, we'll just cut all small businesses out, right? A small business could be a very substantially responsible for a lot of imported emissions. The 50-ton rule was good for our business. It was not an issue to be able to say to those companies, we don't have to have a conversation anymore. You're free to go on and do other things. That was fine. More challenging, I suppose, from from our perspective, is this shift to paying for year one in year two. And that's just a quicker way of explaining it because it's not the same as moving everything further along. Year two will be paid for in year two. Year three will be paid for in year three. But year one will be paid for in year two and through a different system. Now, this has been delivered under the banner of simplification. We don't really think it simplifies anything because it's very, very confusing for business because it doesn't have any kind of business logic. If the right way to do this is to have quarterly CBAM certificate prices set by the EU, then why don't we do that all the time? Why aren't we going to if the right thing to do is to surrender the certificates with a year's delay, then why don't we do that permanently, right? The only reason for setting up this year one in year two business, in our view, is that the Commission, unfortunately, is not ready to start issuing CBAM certificates that price weekly on the 1st of January, which is what they would need to do if this omnibus had not passed. So it means they've got more time to get the system in place. The difficulty for us, well, companies don't necessarily trust, like you don't ask a barber if you need a haircut, is the famous phrase, right? And companies don't want to come to us to find out if they've got a tax bill, which we can help them with. I mean, we know that they've got a tax bill. We know we can help them, but they need to hear it from somebody else. And so this situation where they're going to be accruing taxes, sometimes millions of euros of taxes, all the way through 2026, but there's no compliance procedure. There's no need to hold a certain number of certificates per quarter. There's nothing going on. That's very difficult for us to get across that during that time you are actually storing up a liability that you need to be addressing. So, I mean, if the EU was going to make these changes, I would say at the same time, it really needed to get out there and have, a substantially expanded communication campaign, right? If this is the system, if we're going to be accruing charges in 2026, paying for them in 27, it can't just be those of us in the sort of CBAM compliance advisory industry who are getting that message out, right? It's got to come from Brussels. And I have seen personally a shift between the last commission and this commission in terms of the frequency and volume of communication to business that this is going ahead. And right now is exactly the wrong time for the commission to be dialing the volume down. Like, they need to be out there all the time saying, this is real, this is happening, you need to be running this process. It's not about get ready, it's about run this process now of tracking your CBAM emissions. I'm not really hearing that, and that is a disappointment.
Yes, Gabriel, and talking about communication from the European Commission and consensus, we've heard some rumors this week that I want to address in the next round that I think will be very interesting for everyone here today. For Stanislav, it is my understanding, having covered CBAM for a couple of years now, that some countries like Ukraine and others, I believe South Africa, have sought an exemption from the CBAM or have contested the policy at the World Trade Organization level. Do you believe either of these could move forward or actually take place?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So countries which are contesting EU CBAM include really only South Africa, India, Russia, China. So together they supplied 27% of EU imports in 2024. So they have chosen to confront CBAM directly through diplomatic channels or legal actions. In particular, India has warned that CBAM could be a deal breaker in its ongoing free trade. So with EU, let's see. And Russia initialized, a formal WTO case against CBAM in May 2025. Chinese Steel Association calls CBAM a new trade barrier and demands further talk about possible exemptions. So it's interesting that not only this country, but also Poland government is currently challenging CBAM introduction in Court of Justice of European Union, but it stopped from 8 August 2023 and nobody look at this. It's very funny for me a little bit. But yeah, of course, United Kingdom, will introduce their own CBAM, USA, Australia, Taiwan. So as I told you, CBAM, it was open Pandora box. Every country will react differently. Yeah, and there is no rules. It's like fight without rules. What we will see right now. My assumption that in 3-5 years you will see 80 million ton of global steel trade under CBAM. So and if we are talking about Ukraine, so it's really problems because negative Ukraine will lose export. We understand it because of CBAM. First of all, because of war, we have no other markets. 65% of Ukrainian products go to EU, but it's 70% less than was before war. So if you are talking about volumes, we're talking about 1.5, 2 million ton of steel, something like that, or 1 ton of cement. So it's nothing. Country can 15% of Ukrainian export will be under CBAM regulation, and we estimate losses by 2030 that CBAM could stop export of cement, fertilizers, pig iron, billets, long steel products, and potential losses in 2030 can be $1.6 billion of export. So it's huge amount for small Ukraine, and nobody discuss right now the real impact on country per country on European trade partners, because it will destroy supply chain the same or more like COVID pandemic. And it really will damage it, and some plants will be closed. It will be more problems for some countries. So it's really, and I understand many countries they talking that it's unfair. It's not fair play, because you has 15 years subsidy. Look, last 2 years announced 15 billions subsidies and grants directly to steel plants in Europe for decarbonization. How you can be competitive with this support of decarbonization and compare with Europe? So that's why I don't know how successful will be such negotiations. Yeah, not between Ukraine and EU, but between other countries. Of course, I believe that India will be successful because India is very, very attractive market for European Union. I hope that European bureaucracy also will understand that it's better to give for Ukraine waiver because of war for 5 years, for example, and not to support financially then Ukraine, because we can lose our steel and cement industry, lose taxes, lose jobs. So European bureaucracy can think a little bit more in future, not only about how to protect right now and right here local producers with CBAM. Sorry, to protect your markets exists TRQ system with loopholes, as we know. Yeah. For such countries as Malaysia, Indonesia, and others, it's not good idea to use CBAM as a trade restrictions to close European market. So that's why I think it's start of big diplomacy, and at the end of the day, I believe that it will be like carbon WTO to negotiate all these carbon prices, carbon taxes, CBAM in different countries, and ETS. Because it's not Europe won't. Nobody will introduce the same ETS. Nobody will introduce the same MRV, so monitoring and verification system, the same carbon tax. It will be different taxes, different CBAMs, and so on. And we will need in future carbon WTO to negotiate this.
No, fascinating, Stanislav, and especially as we have been covering this, we're seeing the domino effect of other countries. You mentioned, I believe the UK is implementing its own CBAM in 2027. Australia is looking to do the same. China is growing its own carbon market. Brazil has created its own carbon market. We've seen a domino effect as a result of the CBAM, and that is a concern for trade, for international flows. Thank you, Stanislav. Robert, I want to come back to you. As Gabriel mentioned, and you're on the hook for the imports you bring in and the emissions in 2026. But you can't buy the CBAM certificates until 2027. I'm curious, when it comes to calculating the cost of the CBAM, what information do you still need to make these types of calculations?
Well, obviously the benchmark values, that's the whole thing. Also default values are good to know, because we also have some suppliers who won't cooperate with the whole CBAM thing, or are not able to give real data, let's say. So we would have to use default values there. But the main thing is, of course, the benchmark value. Last week we got a newsletter from the Dutch Emission Authority that confirmed that the benchmark and default values will only be in 2026. 5 preliminary values will be published that allow importers to better estimate their costs. So only the word estimate says it all, of course. I mean, an estimate is an estimate, and in our business, in which a couple of percent can make or break booking an order, let's say, that is a very undesirable situation, of course. And the fact is that until these preliminary values are published, every player in the market in Europe has to decide what to risk what risk to take with offers for projects containing, let's say, non-European material and that come in 2026. I mean, mostly customers are not open for clauses and etc. They want a fixed price. And then, then the battle is okay. Who takes the biggest risks? And of course, depends also a bit on the type of product that you are selling. But it brings a lot of uncertainty and also, you know, for our sales department, for instance, we have prepared tools to enable sales to quickly calculate CBAM costs once we have the available data. But based on preliminary values, we cannot be sure that the complete cost of the CBAM will be incorporated into in the cost price, and that's also a very undesirable situation. So, all in all, it's a very complicated market to work in at the moment. We also have other problems like safeguard quota, etc. And this is really, but that is at least something that you can control, let's say. This, we are really in the dark here. And it also makes that we, on other fields like supply selection, you know, we still have difficulties to make the right choices.
Yes, and I'm curious how this has shifted your supply chain relationships. You mentioned taking on risk. We're still waiting on the default values, and that's something we'll be covering. Gabriel, talking about the European Commission and communication, we've heard rumors and unconfirmed reports. First reported by Nicholas Andries from Climeys that the European Commission, just to give some context, the CBAM cost, if you're a supplier, you're sending something to the EU. Any carbon price paid domestically is you can take that off your CBAM cost. However, we're hearing that there have been rumors that the European Commission is going to require companies to use default values if their suppliers are coming from countries without an established ETS like the UK, ETS like the EU ETS. Gabriel, how do you navigate these uncertainties, and is this something that you think is being considered?
How do you navigate these uncertainties seems to be the question of the hour for pretty much everyone, doesn't it? So this is an interesting situation. Nicholas Andries is a respected analyst in the space. I'm sure that he has heard this information from somebody who is well placed. That's not to say that this is going to happen. It's often the case that people who are close to the policy generating part of these institutions have a vested interest in pushing it in one direction or another, and then try to make these things public in order to sort of push debate. And that could be happening here. What do we know? We know that this proposal is not part of the legislation, the original legislation. We know that it's not part of the omnibus legislation, which went through in record time, but still took 6 or 7 months to go through. In other words, there is no possibility that between now and the start of the CBAM definitive period, that there is going to be, as far as I'm aware, a change to the rules that would exempt, would change the way in which many or most suppliers are treated, and say, you know, all of that supplier information that you've been getting from most geographies that don't have this kind of advanced level carbon price, all of that information is going to be scrapped, ignored, avoided. Instead, we're going to be using default values. You know, clearly that would create, in the long term, it may create more pressure for countries to develop carbon pricing, but it would also create a lot of winners and losers, and the losers in that have a right to complain if that is what goes ahead. So, you know, if you're an importer sourcing low carbon products, right, you've gone through your supply chain in all over China and worked out which are the low carbon products, and suddenly the EU says, well, it doesn't like the way that China's carbon price works. It's not a full cap and trade structure, and therefore we're going to just do a blanket value for all of China. You know, that's a rug pull. I mean, I don't understand why any company that had gone through that work to decarbonize its supply chain to get itself ready for CBAM in this fashion would accept that. Okay, and the core purpose of CBAM here is to get factory level data to actually put pressure on individual economic actors as well as to countries, right? Not just at the country level. I think it would also do a lot of damage to the credibility of the Commission at this stage. They've set out a structure. They've given companies years to get ready. They've said that verification is going to start for calendar year 2026. So it's not ideal. They haven't published a lot of information on how that's going to work yet, but be that as it may, they've said to the world, you need to audit, according to their structures, each individual factory data. And it would be quite a shift now to change that. It is pretty much the one thing that everyone knows about CBAM is that you have to get data from your supplier. Okay? So again, we're seeing this kind of self-created communication problem, which creates a real world problem for the people trying to implement CBAM at the EU level. If you allow speculation, rumors to get out there, if you if you don't run a sort of transparent process, but instead run a process where individual leakers can try to put out information that the entire system is going to change, and you just let that go unchallenged, then you're going to add a lot of instability, uncertainty for business, and business is looking for clarity right now. It's going to undermine the work of a lot of companies that have put in the time to make a strategic decision about how to manage CBAM. So how do we navigate it? Well, we are transparent with our customers, of course, and we are also out there communicating what we know to the wider public as well through our LinkedIn channel, through our monthly newsletter, which is free to subscribe to. We encourage people to we certainly pay attention to these sorts of rumors. In this instance, we don't have information that this is accurate. We certainly don't believe that this is now the settled view of the Commission that they're going to put through. There doesn't seem to be any kind of timeline attached to it. It is possible that the CBAM will mutate, will be changed in certain ways. That's always a possibility. But for now, we know that the legislation is very clear. You have to get supplier data, and you will be taxed on the basis of that supplier data at the end of 2026. So we really encourage our clients just to carry on doing as they're doing, getting that information together, and setting aside appropriate reserves for the financial impact of CBAM.
Gabriel, and again, interesting, just the enormity of the task at hand already, the granularity of the data that you need across your entire supply chain. And then, like you mentioned, I can understand how this might feel like a bit of a rug pull to someone who's already engaging in that. And we'll be covering this as well to see if that becomes a reality. But again, with the definitive period approaching soon, it seems like a difficult task to move. I'd just like to remind the audience as we head into the last couple of minutes, is please send in your questions. We are receiving them and we're delighted to answer them. Just last question for Stanislav. Stanislav, you mentioned how other countries might establish their own CBAMs, other countries establishing their own carbon markets. How have you seen other companies or countries, how do you think the CBAM and carbon pricing in different countries, how will that affect international trade, and specifically for steel, as you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I told you that right now we see this new trend to use climate goals, carbon taxes, ETS systems as a trade measures, as a new tier Q. It's not about climate, what I see. It's only about protection of local market. We see deglobalization. It's not only about Trump, sorry. It started before. So this trend started 2080, 2070, yeah. So, and deglobalization, concentration on local markets, protecting local markets, and how you have read also in last reports from OECD, it's a new wave of industrial policy, yeah? And it's also about support of local producers and protecting market. Okay, we have new mechanism on the table, CBAM, carbon price, will be new technical requirements, I don't know, waste management regulations, and so on and so on and so on, yeah? So that's why, as I told you, that what I'm waiting for, that other country will be more smarter and faster than Europe in implementing such mechanisms, because they don't need to coordinate it between 27 countries and so on. Yeah? So look, my best example always in climate goals in steel, it's India. It's only one country globally that have officially on governmental level green steel standard and green steel classification. It's good or bad, it's real green steel or not, guys, doesn't matter. You discussing already 5-7 years and they have clear roadmap for local producers what to do. So it's like example, yeah, and we will see it more and more. So right now, CBAM, it's really will be new instrument, new mechanism to protect, to fight in these big steel trade wars. Big amount of wars, yeah.
Thank you, Stanislav. And thank you everyone for this lively discussion, talking about details and delays, and also the things that we have known have been established for a while and how they have or haven't changed. I'm just going to look at some of the questions below. Gabriel, I think this one is, when do you think CBAM will be applied to chemicals? Is one of the questions we've gotten today.
Yeah, I mean, it is currently applied to fertilizers, so chemicals are not outside the loop. And in due course, the EU intends to expand CBAM to all goods that are currently covered by the EU ETS. So chemicals is a broad sector. If you're thinking about polymers or whatever, you know, there are a lot of chemicals that are currently under the scope of ETS, and that we would expect CBAM to apply to eventually. In terms of timing, I don't know. I mean, we are supposed to be hearing from the Commission in the next month or so about which sectors they look to expand CBAM to. I would say that given the delays that they've had in implementing CBAM on a practical basis for the existing sectors, I would expect that chemicals are probably not going to be rapidly added. On the other hand, when they are added to the list, I don't think there'll be any kind of a transitional phase for chemicals companies. So, you know, it's probably a matter of having maybe a year's notice, maybe less than that. So, you know, we will continue to keep people updated when we hear information, but for now, there's not much to go on, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you again for our audience for sending that question. This one is for Robert. I'm curious. I mean, you are a steel company in Europe. Do you see an increased demand in green steel or scrap origin steel as an effect of CBAM enforcement?
Not in our line of business, let's say, but let's say for coils and products like that, we see more green steel that is produced in Europe then. What we understand from producers that come up with this green steel is that people are not willing to pay for it, let's say. So that's a problem that they have. But on that field, we see the introduction of green steel for pipes, fittings, and flanges. So our line of business, not yet. No.
And
can I add something, Humberto?
Sure.
Yes,
sure.
Yeah. So I expect that EAF-based producers outside Europe will increase their supplies to European market, as well as producers from MENA countries will develop their own green steel project based on CBAM European policies. If I travel to Dubai or some MENA countries, people just ask me, Stanislav, I hope CBAM will be in time. I hope CBAM will be so strict as possible. People pray for CBAM because they see possibility to export their green steel or greener steel or less carbon steel to European markets. So CBAM will create new opportunities for producers with low CO2 emissions, regardless of their location. And winners will be steel producers that have cheap energy costs. And we know the answers where they are located.
Thank you, Stanislav. No, very, very interesting. And again, we're getting a lot of questions here. I'm just going to read this one out loud. In terms of budgeting the cost for next year, for 2026, on top of the direct CBAM cost, do you think that we need to budget a price increase from EU producers since the demand will be addressed more internally from 2026?
Shall I reply to that?
Yes, please go ahead, Robert.
I think it will depend on which product. For sure, there will be price increases if European producers see that demand is shifting from Asia to Europe. But they also will have, for certain areas, for sure, capacity problems, and that is also a fact. But I'm pretty sure that we've seen that also with, for instance, anti-dumping duties. I mean, they take every opportunity to raise the cost price, especially now when everybody is not really earning money. I think if they have the opportunity to do so, they will. Yes.
Thank you, Robert.
Another question. Humberto, some markets will change dramatically. For example, merchant pig iron market in Europe will die because CBAM price for pig iron will be so high that it will be more attractive to import as a metallics HBI, even not green HBI. So in 2-3 years, we will not see merchant pig iron import to Europe. So some markets will be fully changed. Yeah, but that's why it's really, I fully agree with colleague.
Thank you, Stanislav. And again, we're getting a lot of interesting questions. I see one. I'm going to try to answer this, but Gabriel, feel free if this is something you think you could answer as well. Can high-quality voluntary credits be used for CBAM obligations, and will CCAs or Colombia carbon credits, for example, be credited towards CBAM? The only answer I can think of regarding that as a carbon reporter is I know the EU is looking to integrate carbon removals certification framework into the EU ETS domestically. But as far as I know, I think that would only be a domestic measure. I don't think carbon credits or high quality voluntary credits from other countries could be used towards CBAM. That's at least from my reporting, I don't think that's the case. But Gabriel or anyone else, if you have an idea about this question, please jump in.
No, you're absolutely right. It is just the compliance market that applies. The exact details of how that's going to work is again another update that's coming up. But there's no room for BCM to offset CBAM, I'm afraid. And there are quite a few companies that would like to use certain things to offset CBAM that aren't, just aren't the way that the rules have been drafted.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gabriel. There is a question here, and this might be for Robert or Stanislav. Is there a possibility that CBAM will extend from iron and steel and aluminum subparts that is in the CN code scope to full product ranges?
From what I understood, they are looking at that to go further down the chain, actually. So, yeah, that could well be.
My answer will be, as I started, that they will do everything possible, but step by step. From the first half year, we will see CBAM changes every small or big every 6 months. So if they will see that situation stabilized, they will, I would say, make a progress one more step. But please do not discuss so actively rumors that everything will be in one moment like we see last 2 weeks. Yeah, it's impossible technically. It's technically impossible. Yeah, sorry for emotions.
No, thank you, Stanislav. And I believe we're nearing the end of our presentation. So I want to thank Robert, Gabriel, Stanislav for being on this panel today and just telling us about their experiences, their insights, and their engagement with the CBAM, as we have less than 4 months before the CBAM goes into its definitive phase. I want to thank the attendees for joining us today. You should be receiving a recording of the webinar at a later point this week, but feel free to send us any questions, anything. And I want to thank you again for participating in today's panel, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you, everyone.